My name is Serena Madeline Okafor. I am 34 years old. Last Thursday evening, I sat alone in a rented conference room on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Atlanta and listened to 11 voicemails back to back. I did not cry. I did not move. I just listened. The voicemails were from 7 different numbers. 3 of them I recognized. 4 of them I had blocked 2 years ago. Every single message was from a member of my biological family. Every single one found a way to mention the same figure, $2.4 million. Not one of those voicemails said the words, "I'm sorry, just let that sit." 11 messages, 7 senders, 0 apologies, and 1 number they had seen somewhere that had, apparently, reactivated every relationship I had buried. Before I tell you what happened when I called back, I want to take you somewhere first, to where this actually started, because the money is the end of this story. The beginning is a kitchen in South Carolina in the winter of 2014. And that beginning has everything to do with why my husband wasn't surprised at all. Before I get into what happened in that kitchen, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story is already pulling at something in you. Drop 2 words in the comments, the 2 words your family used when you stopped being useful to them. I want to know. I read every single one. Let me take you back to December 2014. Hartwell, South Carolina. Population 4,220. The kind of place where everyone waves at your car before they know who's driving it, but everyone also knows what your father earned and what your cousin owed on his truck. My family was not poor. They were not rich. They occupied that particular American middle ground where the appearance of stability was treated as identical to stability itself. The house at 14 Birchmont Drive had good bones and a manicured front lawn and a crack in the foundation that my mother had successfully concealed from every appraiser for 11 years. I'll tell you that now so you understand the full picture. It was December 19th. Christmas dinner was still 6 days away, but my Aunt Patricia Renee Okafor, my father's older sister, had organized what she called a family check-in dinner. This was not unusual. Patricia organized everything. She had a laminated binder for Thanksgiving seating arrangements. She sent birthday cards that arrived exactly 2 days early, never one. She was the kind of person who made you feel both deeply cared for and faintly surveilled at all times. I was 23. I had graduated from Clemson University 7 months earlier with a degree in business administration and $31,400 in student loan debt. I had moved back home because I could not yet afford not to. I was working 32 hours a week at a logistics company on Benson Industrial Road, entry level $14.20 an hour, and saving $340 per month after expenses. I had a plan. It was slow and not glamorous, and I was following it. At dinner that night, there were 11 people around the table. My parents, Gerald and Yvonne Okafor, my 2 brothers, Marcus and Devin, my Aunt Patricia and her husband Raymond, my cousin Letitia and her boyfriend, whose name I could never remember, my grandmother, Ora Okafor, who was 81 and ate very slowly and said very little and watched everything. The table smelled of sweet potato casserole and the specific cedar candle Patricia always burned in every room she considered important. It was not my family's custom to ask each other direct questions about money. It was, however, their custom to create conditions in which you were expected to perform a kind of financial status update without being directly asked. Patricia was masterful at this. She would describe a cousin's new car, then pause. She would mention that Marcus had just gotten a raise, then look at me with warm, patient eyes. The silence was the question. That night, I answered the silence directly. I said, "I'm doing okay. I'm not where I want to be yet. I'm building savings, but it's slow. I don't have much of a cushion right now." The table did not stop. No one gasped. But something shifted in the air the way a room shifts when someone opens a window in winter. A quiet, collective adjustment. My grandmother, Ora, looked at me and nodded once, slowly, the way she nodded when something confirmed something she already knew. My mother, Yvonne, glanced at my father. My father looked at his plate. My Aunt Patricia tilted her head and smiled and said, "Well, you're still young. You'll get there, sweetheart. Just let that sit." Marcus said nothing. Devin said nothing. Letitia's boyfriend refilled his glass. The dinner continued. No one asked a follow-up question. No one said, "Is there anything you need?" No one said, "How can we help?" The table absorbed my honesty the way dry ground absorbs water, quickly, completely, without a trace. That was December 19th, 2014. By January 9th, 2015, I had not been invited to the New Year's dinner. I found out through a group photo Letitia posted on Facebook, all 11 of them. Same table, same candle. My chair was empty and no one had mentioned my absence in the caption. Pause. It was not dramatic. That is what made it work. There were no accusations, no sit-down conversation, no phone call where someone explained what I had done wrong by being honest about my finances. Patricia simply began organizing events I was not told about. My mother began answering my calls with shorter and shorter sentences. My father sent me a text on my birthday that said, "Happy birthday, call when you can," and did not pick up when I called. I went to Patricia's house on February 14th, 2015, a Sunday, because I knew she'd be home. I knocked. She opened the door in a cream cardigan and looked at me with an expression that was warm and slightly pained, as though I were a neighbor she liked but whose dog had gotten into her garden. She said, "Serena, what a nice surprise." I said, "Am I being pushed out?" She tilted her head, the same tilted head from the dinner table. "Pushed out? No, of course not. We've just all been so busy. I haven't heard from Mom in 3 weeks. She's had a lot going on. You know how she gets." "Patricia, I told the truth at dinner. That's the only thing that changed." She looked at me with eyes that were absolutely steady and absolutely kind and said, "Honey, nobody wants to hear about problems when we're trying to enjoy each other." She smiled. I let that sit. Then I left. I did not yell. I did not cry in the doorway. I walked back to my 2009 Honda Civic with a cracked passenger mirror, and I sat in the driver's seat for 4 minutes and stared at the dashboard. Then I put the car in reverse and I drove back to my apartment on Garrison Street, the one bedroom that smelled faintly of the previous tenant's cigarettes no matter how many times I cleaned, and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my laptop and I updated my resume. The bus ticket I purchased the following week was $47 one way to Atlanta, Georgia. I bought it with my credit card. I put the receipt in the small wooden box I kept on top of my dresser, the box my grandmother Aura had given me when I turned 16. Dark walnut finish, brass hinges, a small tarnished latch. She had given it to me without explanation, which was her way. I did not open that box again for 6 years. I arrived in Atlanta on a Tuesday morning in March 2015 with $680 in my checking account, one rolling suitcase, a backpack, and no one who was expecting me. I had researched hostels. I spent 11 days in a place called Midtown Bunk on Peachtree Street, $28 a night, bunk beds, communal showers, a breakfast that was 2 pieces of toast and instant coffee in a paper cup. The room smelled of synthetic lemon cleaner and damp sneakers. I kept my suitcase locked even when I was in the room. I applied for 43 jobs in those 11 days. I know because I kept a spreadsheet. On day 12, I was hired as a junior operations coordinator at a freight logistics company called Bellhaven Cargo Solutions on Fulton Industrial Boulevard. The salary was $36,000 per year. I accepted before the hiring manager finished the sentence. I found a room in a shared house in the West End neighborhood, $510 a month, 4 roommates, a bathroom I shared with 2 of them. There was a grocery store 4 blocks away where I bought rice, canned beans, frozen vegetables, and whatever protein was on clearance. My weekly food budget for the first 8 months was $38. I called my mother on Easter Sunday 2015. She answered. She asked how Atlanta was. I said it was good. She said that was good. There was a silence that lasted long enough to feel like a verdict. Then she said she had to start dinner and she would call me later. She did not call me later. I'll tell you what no contact costs you, because no one talks about the specific invoice. There is no emergency contact. I needed a root canal in August 2015, and the form asked for an emergency contact, and I wrote a roommate's name, a woman named Deja Simmons, who I had known for 6 months, because there was no one else. I felt a particular kind of shame filling out that form that had nothing to do with the tooth. There are no birthday calls. My birthday is October 3rd. In 2015, 2016, and 2017, no one from my family called. The absence was not nothing. It had a weight. It sat in the particular silence of your phone not ringing on the one day of the year when the world has a consensus that someone should call. And then there is the story you cannot correct. Somewhere back in Hartwell, South Carolina, there was a version of me being narrated. I could not hear it. I could not rebut it. I did not know if I was the ungrateful daughter who had abandoned the family or the troubled one who had moved away for reasons nobody wanted to say out loud, or something worse. The story was being told without me, and it would harden into fact by the time anyone thought to question it. That is one of the quiet structural costs of leaving. Your absence becomes evidence for whatever they need it to mean. But silence also gave me something. The first morning I woke up without bracing for my phone, without the low-level physical tension of waiting to be needed or assessed or managed, was a Wednesday in April 2016. I woke up at 6:14 a.m. to my alarm, made coffee, and sat in the kitchen of the West End house while the neighborhood woke up outside the window. I was not waiting for anyone's approval of that moment. I was just in it. It was quiet in a way that was unfamiliar, then familiar, then necessary. I sat there for 22 minutes drinking that coffee. No one called. No one needed me to be anything specific. The morning was just a morning. I was not healed. I was not okay. But I was inside my own life for the first time I could clearly remember. That is different from okay. It is something better. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to get a lot more complicated. There was no montage, just alarm clocks and spreadsheets, and falling asleep with a textbook open on my chest. In 2016, I enrolled in a part-time MBA program at Georgia State University. I financed it through a combination of employer tuition assistance, Belhaven covered 40 IE, and a $12,000 private loan that I negotiated down from $14,500 by calling the financial aid office 3 separate times and asking specifically about hardship considerations. I took notes during those calls. I had learned to document everything. It's how I grew up. My manager at Belhaven was a woman named Claudette Ann Ferris. She was 51 years old, originally from Trinidad, and she had the particular brand of directness that belongs to people who have spent decades watching others waste time on performance. She noticed in my first 3 months that I was the only person on the operations floor who cross-referenced vendor invoices with the original purchase orders before approving payment. She called me into her office and asked me why. I told her I assumed there are errors until I've confirmed there aren't. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "That's not how most people think." "I know." She leaned forward slightly. "Where does that come from?" "Experience," I said. She nodded once and did not push further. That was the moment, not the promotion that came 14 months later, not the salary adjustment. The moment she decided I was worth her time was the moment she recognized that my vigilance was not anxiety. It was data. Claudette became my mentor in the way that real mentors work, not through formal declarations or coffee shop pep talks, but through proximity and increment. She forwarded me emails that weren't technically my business. She included me in client calls where I was listed as note-taker, but encouraged to speak. She reviewed my MBA assignments when I asked, once per week on Thursday evenings for 18 months. She never charged me anything. She never asked for credit. I'll tell you now so you understand. Claudette Ann Ferris is the reason I know how to run a business. Not graduate school, not instinct, her. In the spring of 2017, I met a man named Daniel Osei Okafor, no relation, at a professional networking event at the Marriott Marquis in downtown Atlanta. He was a financial analyst at a mid-size investment firm, earnest in a way that was rare for that room, and he made a joke about the cheese plate that was so specific and dry that I laughed without meaning to. We talked for 2 hours at that event and exchanged numbers, and he called the next day at 11 a.m., not the evening, not 3 days later, 11 a.m. the next morning, and asked if I wanted to get coffee. I told him, before our second date, that I was estranged from my family. Not all the details, just the fact and the direction. He did not flinch. He did not say, "I'm sure they mean well," or "Have you tried talking to them," or "Family is everything." He said, "That takes a particular kind of clarity. I respect it." Then he asked what I was reading, and the evening continued. On our 6th date over jollof rice at a restaurant on Decatur Street that had mismatched chairs and a line out the door every Friday night, he told me about his own family. A father who had been present but emotionally vacant in a way that was almost clinical. a mother who compensated through fierce consuming attention that left no room for autonomy. He had not cut them off. He had established a careful, controlled distance. He called it managed proximity. We sat in silence for a moment after that. Then he said, "You went further than I did." "I had to," I said. "I know," he said. We did not speak again for several minutes. We ate. The restaurant was loud around us. That silence between us was not awkward. It was the specific silence of two people recognizing the same terrain. We were married in September 2019, 27 guests, a ceremony in Piedmont Park. The wine was a Côte du Rhône that cost $11 a bottle, and we bought 30 of them, and there was still some left over at the end of the night. My grandmother Aura was the only member of my biological family who was invited. She was the only one who would have come. She sat in the front row in a lavender dress and a small hat with a fabric flower, and she cried without making any sound, which was exactly how she did everything. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. 6 months before the wedding, my grandmother had called me, not for the first time, but for the first time without someone else knowing she was doing it. And she said, "Serena, your people don't deserve you. I want you to know that I know that." I held the phone and said nothing for a moment. She said, "I couldn't say it before. I'm saying it now." "Why now, Grandma?" "Because I'm 83, she said, "and I'm running out of reasons to wait." She died 14 months after our wedding on November 8, 2020 at 4:17 in the afternoon. She left me one thing, not money, not property. She left me a letter, which her attorney delivered by mail in a small white envelope with slanted handwriting that I recognized as hers even before I saw the return address. I set the envelope on top of the small wooden box on my dresser. I did not open either of them. In 2021, I left Belhaven Cargo Solutions and launched a supply chain consulting firm with a former colleague, a woman named Priya Natarajan Bhatt, who had her own version of exile from a family that had expected her to be a doctor and had never forgiven her for pivoting into logistics. We had met over shared spreadsheets and discovered our parallel histories over shared takeout containers one evening when we had both stayed until 9 p.m. untangling a vendor dispute. Priya's bonding moment with me was not a triumph. It was a Tuesday evening in 2018 when her father called her office line. She had given him that number, which she later described as a mistake she had been paying for in increments, and she took the call in the conference room with the glass walls, and I could see her face change, degree by degree, into the particular blankness that comes from performing calm while something is happening to you. When she came back to her desk, she said, "Sorry, family." I said, "I know." She looked at me. "I mean it," I said. "I know." We did not hug. We went back to the spreadsheet. But something was settled between us from that moment. Okafor D. Natarajan Consulting launched in January 2021 with 4 clients, $80,000 in startup capital between us, and a shared office space in Old Fourth Ward that had exposed brick and a coffee maker that took 3 minutes per cup. By December 2022, we had 21 clients and a staff of 8. By March 2024, the firm's annual revenue had crossed $2.4 million. I'll tell you now so you understand. We did not become successful because we were extraordinary. We became successful because we were specific, reliable, and completely unbothered by approval. That is not a metaphor. That is a management philosophy that came directly from learning to live without the one form of approval I had wanted most. In the spring of 2024, I finally opened the small wooden box. I had moved it from apartment to apartment, from the West End house to the Decatur apartment, to the home Daniel and I bought in Kirkwood in 2021. It had sat on my dresser through every version of my adult life. I had dusted it, I had moved it, I had never opened it. Inside the box was a $20 bill folded into a small square, the kind of fold you make when you want money to last, to feel intentional. There was a handwritten note on the back of a grocery receipt in my grandmother Aura's handwriting, "For the road. Whenever you decide to take it, I'll be proud either way." She had put it in the box when she gave it to me at 16. 18 years before I opened it, I sat on the edge of my bed with the $20 in my hand. Daniel came in and saw my face and sat down next to me without asking for an explanation. I told him what was in the box. I told him what it meant. He said she knew. She knew, I said. I set the $20 on the dresser next to the white envelope with my grandmother's letter inside. Then I opened that too. I won't repeat everything she wrote, but I will tell you the last line because it reframed everything. She wrote, "The ones who left you to struggle alone told you more about their character in that moment than in every year before it. You were not the family's problem. You were their mirror." Pause. They found out in early September 2024. I'll tell you how because the mechanism matters. A regional business journal, Atlanta Business Monthly, had run a profile on Okafor Natarajan Consulting as part of a feature on women-owned firms scaling past the $1 million revenue mark. The article included my full name, my professional history, a photograph of me and Priya in our old Fourth Ward office, and a line that mentioned the firm had recently closed its second fiscal year with revenues exceeding $2.4 million. The article was published online on September 3rd. My cousin Letitia's boyfriend, whose name I later learned was Trevor Moss, had a Google alert set up for my name. I don't know why. I didn't know anyone in my family knew what a Google alert was, but Trevor found the article, and Trevor showed Letitia, and Letitia showed my Aunt Patricia, and Patricia showed my mother, Yvonne, and within 48 hours the information had reached every branch of the family tree. I know all of this because of what came next. The first voicemail arrived on September 5th at 8:43 a.m. It was from my brother Marcus. His voice had the careful casualness of a man rehearsing. He said he had seen the article and that it was amazing, his word, and that he was so proud of me and that we should reconnect because it had been way too long. He did not say, "I'm sorry I didn't call on your birthday for 3 years." The second voicemail was from my mother, Yvonne, recorded at 11:22 a.m. the same day. She said she had always known I would do something great. She said she missed me. She said she had been meaning to reach out. Her voice broke slightly on the word missed. She did not say, "I stopped answering your calls." The third voicemail was from Patricia herself. It was the longest. It was also the most precise in its framing. Warm, measured, completely in control. She talked about family and legacy and how proud the Okafor name should be of what I had built. She said she had always told everyone I was special. She said she had a business matter she thought I might find interesting. She said we should have dinner. She did not say, "You were right at that table in December 2014. The fourth, fifth, and sixth voicemails were from my brother Devin, my cousin Letitia, and an aunt whose name I will not say here because she had never spoken to me directly in my adult life, and I do not owe her even a pseudonym. The seventh voicemail was from a number I did not recognize, a man's voice, measured, deliberate. He introduced himself as a family friend of the Okafors who was interested in discussing a potential business collaboration. He mentioned Patricia. He mentioned the $2.4 million figure twice. He said the number like it was a key, like saying it out loud should open a door. I listened to all 11 voicemails sitting in that rented conference room on the 14th floor in downtown Atlanta. My phone on the table, my hands flat on the surface. The room was very still. Then I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. I said, "They found the article." He said, "I know." I said, "You knew they would?" He said, "Yes." There was a pause. "You're not surprised?" I said. "No," he said. "Are you?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Nothing yet." I said, "I want to think." "Okay," he said. "Come home when you're ready. There's food." That was the whole call. That's Daniel. He doesn't fill silence with reassurance. He offers food. I sat in that conference room for another 22 minutes. Then I picked up my bag and went home. In October 2024, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at the Georgia Supply Chain Leaders Summit, held at the Westin Peachtree Plaza in downtown Atlanta. 420 attendees. I had been on the planning committee for 2 years and had been asked to speak 8 months before the event, long before the Business Journal article, long before any of this. I accepted and prepared a 20-minute address on ethical vendor relationships and the economics of organizational trust. I did not know, until the morning of the event, that my Aunt Patricia was attending, Priya told me. She had seen Patricia's name on the registered attendee list while reviewing the final head count. She walked into my office and set the printed list on my desk and pointed to the name without comment. I looked at it. Patricia Renee Okafor Briggs, registered under an events management consulting firm I had never heard of. I'll tell you now so you understand. Patricia had not been in supply chain or events management before September 2024. Her registration was recent. The firm name pulled up a website that had been built within the last 6 weeks. I looked at Priya. She said, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing different," I said. "I'm going to give my speech." "Okay," Priya said. "You're going to be in the front row." I said. "Obviously," she said. I walked onto that stage at 2:15 p.m. in a charcoal blazer and dark trousers and shoes that cost $340 and that I'd bought with my own money. And I placed my notes on the lectern and I looked out at 420 people in tiered conference seating, and I found Patricia in the third row from the back, left side, before I had said a single word. She was wearing a forest green blazer and a pearl necklace, and she was watching me with an expression that I recognized immediately. It was the expression from the doorway in February 2015. Warm, slightly pained, recalibrating in real time. Her first instinct, I could see, was not pride. It was calculation, where to sit, who was watching, how to position herself relative to the woman at the podium who had once been the relative she had quietly set aside. I gave my speech. I spoke for 22 minutes about what it costs organizations in real dollars to devalue reliable people. I spoke about the inverse relationship between institutional trust and operational risk. I spoke about what happens when systems choose presentable comfort over honest feedback. I had written the speech in February 2024, months before any of this. But standing on that stage, I understood that I had been writing it for 10 years. Near the end, I said this, and I said it to the room, not to her. The organizations that survive are the ones that can tolerate honesty from people who have nothing to gain from performing otherwise. The moment you train your team to tell you what you want to hear, you have outsourced your risk management to your ego, and your ego will not warn you. It will just let you be surprised. Pause. I stepped away from the lectern to applause. I did not look at the third row from the back. The reception following the keynote was held in an adjacent ballroom with white linen and standing cocktail tables and 2 open bars. I was speaking with a logistics director from Savannah when I felt a specific change in the air to my left, the particular shift that happens when someone is approaching with intention. Patricia touched my arm. Her hand was light. "Serena," she said. Her voice was exactly as warm as it had been in February 2015. It was extraordinary, really, the consistency of it. I turned. My mother, Yvonne, was standing slightly behind Patricia, and beside her was my brother Marcus. I'll tell you what I felt, nothing dramatic, a kind of clarity, the way a room feels when someone turns on an overhead light after hours of floor lamps. Patricia said, "Your speech was wonderful. You've really come into your own." I looked at her. "Thank you, Patricia." My mother stepped forward. Her eyes were bright. She was working very hard on her expression. "I've missed you," she said. "I know," I said. Marcus said, "Serena, come on. We all made mistakes. Can we start fresh?" I looked at my brother, at Marcus, who had said nothing at a dinner table in December 2014, who had been in a group photo on New Year's that I wasn't invited to, who had not called on my birthday for 3 consecutive years and had called within 48 hours of reading a business journal article. I said, "Marcus, you called because you saw a number." He opened his mouth. "I don't say that to be harsh," I said. "I say that because it's true and you know it's true." My mother said, "That's not fair." "Mom," I looked at her. "I called you on Easter Sunday 2015. You said you'd call me back. I waited 6 months, and then I stopped waiting. You didn't reach out again until this week." I held her gaze. "I love you. And that doesn't fix what I just said." She looked at me with something raw crossing her face, not performance for once, something real and a little frightened. I turned to Patricia. She was watching me with those steady, warm, intelligent eyes. "Patricia," I said, "I came to your door in February 2015 and asked you a direct question. You told me nobody wants to hear about problems. I have thought about that sentence many times. I think you believed it. That might be the saddest part." She said nothing. Her expression did not collapse, but something behind it did. I said, "I'm not angry anymore. I want you to know that, but I'm also not available the way you're hoping." I picked up my glass. "Enjoy the reception." I walked away, steady, even. No slamming. That night, from our kitchen table in Kirkwood, I sent one email. I addressed it to my mother, with Patricia and Marcus and Devin copied. The email was 4 paragraphs. It said, "I am not interested in being contacted about my business, my finances, or investment opportunities. I am willing to correspond by email only on the topic of rebuilding a relationship, but only if that correspondence begins with specificity about what occurred in 2014 and 2015 and does not require me to act as though it didn't. I am not asking for a performance of accountability. I am asking for a sentence that is true. If that sentence exists, I will read it. If it doesn't, I'll understand." I closed my laptop. Daniel set a plate of rice and grilled fish in front of me and sat down across the table. "You okay?" he said. "I think so," I said. "Your voice sounds like your voice," he said. This is the thing he says when I am being genuinely myself rather than managing myself for someone else's comfort. He says it rarely, and he means it precisely. I ate. The kitchen was warm. Outside, Kirkwood was doing what it does at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Occasional cars, a dog, a neighbor's television through the thin October air. I finished my plate. I did not orchestrate what happened next. I want to be very clear about that. Within 3 weeks of the summit, Patricia's attempt to position herself within my professional network became visible to people who knew my actual professional history. She had attended 2 additional supply chain events in November 2024, both times introducing herself as a close associate of mine to people who then emailed me to confirm. I confirmed nothing. I replied to each inquiry with a brief note, "I don't have a professional relationship with that individual." That was all it took. The community recalibrated without my involvement. Whispers move through the professional network the way whispers do, with the specific velocity of people who have collectively caught something that was trying to be presented as something else. Patricia's registrations at 2 subsequent events were quietly not renewed. The events management consulting firm's website went offline in December 2024. She had built something on the foundation of my name without asking. The foundation turned out to be mine to withdraw at any moment. My brother Devin, the quieter brother, the one who had always been in the background of every family event, refilling drinks, carrying dishes, saying the correct thing, called me in November on a Sunday afternoon, not to ask for anything. He called and said, "I've been thinking about that dinner in 2014, the Christmas one. I was there." "I know," I said. "I didn't say anything," he said. "I know that too." A pause. "I don't have an excuse for that," he said. I let that sit. I didn't fill the silence with forgiveness or reassurance because he wasn't asking for either. He was just stating what was true. "I know," I said again. "I'm sorry," he said. It came out plainly. No production, no setup, too late to repair things, not worthless either. Devin and I have spoken 4 times since that call, carefully, with appropriate space between conversations. He sends me articles about supply chain trends occasionally, which is how he shows up for people now that he's learned that presence doesn't require occasion. My mother sent me an email in December 2024. It was 3 sentences. It did not meet the bar I had set in my email. It did not name what happened. It did not use the word 2014 or 2015. It said only that she hoped I knew I was loved and that she hoped one day we could sit together again. It was not the sentence I had asked for, but it was the most she had written toward honesty in my memory. I wrote back one line, "I know you love me. I also know what happened." Both of those things are true at the same time. I did not hear from Patricia. I expected that. She is not someone who writes toward honesty. She is someone who writes toward outcomes. Once the outcome she wanted was off the table, there was nothing left for her to compose. My father, Gerald, has not contacted me. Gerald is the one unresolved door. I have thought about calling him. I have not called him. The door is not closed. It is not open either. It is just a door in a hallway I am not ready to walk down yet. In January 2025, Priya and I established a small annual fund through the firm. We named it the Aura Okafor Professional Mobility Award. It is not a large fund. $15,000 per year, distributed in grants of $2,000 to $5,000 to first-generation professionals in the Atlanta metro area who are navigating career transitions without family financial support. The application asks 2 questions. Where are you trying to go, and what is the one thing standing between you and getting there? We review the applications together on Thursday evenings, which is the time slot that used to belong to Claudette's weekly reviews of my MBA assignments. We have funded 11 people in the first year, a logistics coordinator pivoting to operations management, a young woman finishing a business degree who was supporting herself on $1,100 a month, a man who had been out of the workforce for 2 years following a family crisis and was rebuilding from the bottom. I write a short note with every grant. I don't say much. I say the gap between where you are and where you're going is real. It is also crossable. I know this because I crossed it. So does Priya. We are rooting for you with specificity. I sign my name. I mail it first class. Last Saturday, we had 8 people over for dinner. Priya and her husband, Claudette and her daughter, who is 22 and in her first year of a supply chain master's program. 2 colleagues from the firm, Deja Simmons, my old roommate, the one I had listed as my emergency contact in 2015, who now lives 3 miles from us and has a daughter named Amara, who is 4, and had fallen asleep on our couch by 8 p.m. The table is a farmhouse style from an estate sale, wide, scuffed, slightly uneven on one end. The plates don't match. There are 4 white ones, 2 blue ones, one that has a small gold rim that I bought at a thrift store on Moreland Avenue for $2, and one that Claudette brought years ago and never took back. The wine was the same Côte de Rhône from our wedding, which we now buy by the case because we like it, and because it costs $11 a bottle, and we are people who know the difference between what is worth spending money on and what is simply expensive. The conversation was loud and comfortable and covered 3 topics simultaneously at different ends of the table, and no one was monitoring anyone else's comfort or performing anything for anyone. At one point, Daniel looked across the table at me in the middle of a conversation about something completely unrelated and said nothing. Just looked. I looked back. That was the whole moment. That was all it needed to be. I thought briefly of a table in Hartwell, South Carolina, that smelled of cedar candles and careful silence. A table where being honest about $680 and a cracked passenger mirror had ended an invitation. This table was nothing like that table. I didn't say that out loud. The table already knew. If you're still listening, I want to say something directly to you. Maybe this story sounded familiar in places, not necessarily in its details, but in its shape. Maybe you have been at a table where the wrong kind of honesty cost you something. Maybe you have answered a question truthfully and felt the room adjust around you in a way that told you, without anyone saying it, that the truth was not what was wanted. Maybe you've been called difficult, ungrateful, too much, too sensitive, too independent. These words get used on people who refuse to perform the version of themselves that someone else finds convenient. They are not descriptions. They are management tools. They are the vocabulary of people who needed you to stay small and found out that you weren't going to. Here's what I know. The people who left you alone when you said you were struggling told you more about their priorities in that moment than in everything that came before it. What they showed you was not a mistake. It was information. You were allowed to use it. The ones who came back when they saw the number in the article, they were not returning to you. They were returning to what you had become. You, they already left. The $2.4 million was the only part of you they ever wanted. Let them have that story. It was never about you. It was always about what they could use. Here is the core of it. Belonging is not built from blood or obligation or long history. It is built from showing up when there is nothing to gain. The people at my table last Saturday, they showed up when I had $680 and a rolling suitcase. They showed up when I had a room that smelled like someone else's cigarettes. They showed up when I had nothing to offer except who I was. That is the table I was trying to build my whole life. It just took leaving the wrong one to find it. I want to ask you something before you go, and I want you to actually sit with it if your family called you tomorrow. After years of silence, after years of distance, what do you think they would say? Help me? Or I'm sorry? Think about that. Really think. Then drop it in the comments. Just those 2 words or the story behind them. I read every single one, and I mean that without exception. If you want more stories like this one, about the cost of honesty, about what it takes to build a life from the pieces of a family that wouldn't hold them, there's more waiting for you on this channel. And every single one is told from the other side, where the air is clearer. Thank you for listening tonight. Genuinely. I'll see you in the next one.